Welcome to another episode of Chac's Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Chac's Chat podcast. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and an accessibility wizard here at Chac's Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am the other accessibility wizard here at Chac's Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org and click on certifications to learn more about those great certifications. Always good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing well.
Awesome.
I spent last week up in Vermont visiting my son, and cool. Weather was great. Weather was really nice. Not a lot of leaf changing going on because it was so dry up there, but yeah, we were a little disappointed. But yeah. How about you? You just got back from
Dubai. Yeah.
Dubai.
So I was in Dubai. It was really great. Accessibility is a really interesting thing over there. It's very physical accessibility is very much in the forefront. People who are blind, there's a little bit of a gap there. There's some work that needs to be done to kind of bring document accessibility, what we do, into the forefront of what is an independent user experience for someone who's blind. And in fact, I wrote a LinkedIn article about it and some of my findings. So follow me. Those of you who are listening, follow me on LinkedIn and go look up my Dubai article. You'll get the skinny on what's going on. Awesome. Speaking of skinny, Chad, I have to tell you, so I've been on my weight loss journey now since January of last year. So almost a year. I finally broke the 240 pound mark. So I am 236.6. So that means I have lost almost 80 pounds.
Congrats.
Since I started my journey. So yeah.
Congrats. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a whole new thing, man, for sure. Being able to drop something on the ground, bend over and pick it up and not have to like kick my leg way out. And yeah, it's a whole set of stuff that I can do now that I couldn't do before. So
good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Hey, so today we want to talk about accessible color. Right. And this is a topic that we don't often talk about, but I think it's definitely one that deserves its attention because I think some people may have some misconceptions about what it means to have accessible color contrast or the use of color alone and what that all means, right? Especially when it comes to things like bar charts and line graphs and pie charts. And we see people dumping all sorts of pattern fills inside all that stuff. And then their bosses complain or their other people complain in their organization. Accessibility makes us look so terrible. And it doesn't have to be that way. Right, Chad?
Agreed. No, I totally agree. I think, that I think we as designers have kind of been taught to use color to convey information. You know what I mean? Like, I think we've literally been instructed to do that. And, when we get into the accessibility space, it becomes a challenge, right? Because there's a fairly large group of people, right? So ranging from low vision users, such as myself, to colorblind users, right? And people who have difficulty perceiving color, right? And I think a lot of times, Dax, you had mentioned the pattern fill problem. Right. I think a lot of times people overcompensate for the problem, right? Like, they're like, oh, I can't use color. And so instead I'm going to use all pattern fills, right? And it's really not, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that bad. You just have to know, how to approach the problem.
So, Chad, one of the things that we teach people is that instead of patterns, there are lots of other ways that you can actually differentiate one thing from another. And one of the ones I love to use is a label, right? Yeah. Where I can actually put the letter A, B, or C kind of at the base of a bar chart or inside a pie slice. But often we use another principle that I like even better, which is to incorporate all of the usable text into the legend, right?
The legend kind of helps you to identify the information in the chart, right?
Right.
Now, you have to be a little careful, right? Because when you force a user to create the connection between the legend and the content,
Yes.
that can be a bit of a cognitive challenge for certain people, right?
So what you're talking about really is, let's say you've got a pie slice and you label the pie slices A, B, C, and D. And then you've got a legend that kind of also lists A, B, and C, and then has all the values and stuff in it, right?
Right. Or I mean, the bigger problem is like when you don't have a label and the way that you create the connection is, okay, this slice has a pattern fill, and in the legend, I'm showing that pattern fill, and that's what this means.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what I see sometimes too is where the little sample swatch that's in the legend is minute, is so minuscule you can't hardly see it. Microsoft, if you're listening, give us the ability to adjust the size of that box independent from the size of the text. Right now, the only way to make the box bigger is to make the text and the legend bigger. They are attached to each other. And so there's no way to kind of do that. You kind of have to fake it and make new boxes and put them on top of the old ones. It's a pain in the butt. But yeah.
And a lot of times that'll break the graph.
Yes,
right? Because like once you start manipulating them, now it's no longer connected to the data. Right. And that's another, and that happens in Adobe Illustrator too. We run into the same problem where you try to manipulate it too much and then it breaks the connection to the data, which is not helpful.
Boy, Illustrator is a tough one for accessibility. And when it comes to bar charts and line graphs, they have not updated that thing in forever.
Yeah.
But so going back to what we were talking about, right? So when you have a legend, if you put all the information in the legend, so, Monday, 13, Tuesday, 14, Wednesday, 15, then your pie really becomes decorative, right? And then color contrast really isn't even an issue.
Yeah, it's irrelevant, right? Because now if you're a sighted user and you appreciate the visual, that's being displayed, that's fantastic. But, for users of assistive technology, they don't have that benefit. And so having all that data right there in the legend is everything they need to know.
Well, even as a sighted user, I'm able to just look at the legend and get all the information without having to go through the cognitive gymnastics of looking at the pie slice and trying to figure out what's what. And then now here's the thing though, is that people say, well, then I'm just going to do that every time. The reality is there's a good, better, best when it comes to graphics. Now I can choose to put all that text in the legend and then, who cares about the color contrast? I can use light blues and light grays and browns and whatever I want in the pie graph. But the reality is you can still accommodate for both. It's just not a requirement because you have that alternative way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love the label stacks, right? Because like whether it's a pie chart, whether it's a bar graph, line graphs as well. Like when you put a label there, we still try to meet minimum color contrast in those graphics for the benefit of all users. But the fact that there's a label there almost makes the colors insignificant. Right. I think the only time you can get into trouble is when like you have two colors that can look exactly the same. And then it might be hard to follow them where they might overlap.
Well, and that's where a pattern fill might be beneficial, right? Where you can say, okay, I'm going to put a pattern fill in one of the colors rather than all of the colors, or you might add a break in the line, like a white border where one overlaps the other to help differentiate where one goes for the other. But the reality is that you can choose to make sure that there is good color contrast in your bar chart or line graph or whatever data visualization you have, and have that information in your legend. But you don't have to. And I think that the problem or the challenge is that it's a balance, and people like the rules. They want to know, if I follow this, I'm good to go. If I don't follow that, I'm going to be in trouble. And a lot of what we do is nuanced. And that really is one of those things, because you might look at this and say, well, my primary means of identifying this information is visual. The pie chart is the way I'm going to primarily decide what the values are. And somebody else might say, well, I'm just looking at the text and the legend, and I think that's the thing. So who's to say I shouldn't do it one way or the other? You kind of feel like, well, maybe I should do it both ways.
Right. And, we're trying to do this work for the benefit of a large group of people. Right. And just like I've said before, right, like everybody has their own preference, right? Yeah. Everybody reads documents in different ways, right? I had said in one of the previous podcast acts where I never read a footnote when I'm reading my content,
Sure.
And there's other people out there like, how can you not read the footnote? That's so important, but there's just a way, that's my preference. That's a way that I am. And I think a lot of us are like that. We all have kind of a certain way that we like to, read content and consume content. And for some people, those pie charts are they really suck you in. And I love pie charts because I think it's a great way of creating a relationship to the information. Sure. I can see the biggest pie, the smallest pie, and very quickly I can make a judgment on, who's doing what. But, sure. But yeah, I think we need to always remember that we're serving the needs of a vast group of people. And so for that reason,
multiple ways.
You have to consider, multiple ways. That's exactly where I was going, Dax, for sure.
Well, so to be clear, for those of you who might be new to accessibility, right, you've got 3 color contrast ratios that you need to be concerned about. Really 2. The first one is for any graphic or large text, your color contrast needs to be 3:1. And there are tools, we're going to talk about those here in just a minute. There are tools that we love to use that help us evaluate those. Some are embedded in the programs you're using. Others are third-party tools. But 3:1 is your baseline. That is your big text and graphics. And then you've got 4.5:1, which is your regular text, right? And so we see the light gray text all the time in body copy. Just know that anything below 70, I think it's like 73%, I err on the side of 80%. 80% black is going to keep you in a good 4.5:1 color contrast. Anything lower than that, and again, against a white background. But that's going to be kind of your sweet spot. So if you like that light gray, 80% is the way to go. So 4.5:1 is regular text.
And regular text is what?
Anything that is below 14 point bold. So 13 point bold, 13 and a half point bold, right? That, or 17 point regular and below. So anything underneath that. And then there's the AAA requirement, which is 7:1 color contrast. Now, here's a great nod. If you're trying to show your accessibility chops, you were able to say, look, our document complies with WCAG 2.1 or 2.2 AA and some AAA requirements. That's kind of a nice feather in your cap. So if you choose a color palette that incorporates 7:1 color contrast, it's kind of a nice way to go a little bit beyond to make sure that everyone can read your document.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, as we're talking about graphics and color contrast requirements, logos are exempt from color contrast requirements.
The conference I was just at in Dubai, their logo was orange and yellow. And here's where I feel like I got to draw the line. That if you're an accessibility conference, even though it is exempt, your logo should meet common color.
I'm not going to argue with you on that, Dax. And I 100% agree. Like, if you're an accessibility conference and you had the ability to develop your accessibility logo,
yes,
you should have done your due diligence and at the very least made sure it had minimum color contrast. I think that the reason why logos are exempt is because you can't tell. Trying to think of a good example. Coca-Cola, I think, probably does meet minimum color contrast.
Togo's sandwiches is orange. Their color is orange. So you can't tell Togo's.
And I think maybe, what's the one? Valero. I'm trying to think of some examples of of logos that don't. But fundamentally, it's not. You're not violating anything if your logo doesn't meet minimum color contrast. However, right, if you're a new company, right,
Yeah.
and you're starting your branding from ground zero, I would highly, highly encourage you to use colors that meet minimum color. It's just going to make your life easier, right?
Yeah.
And then you can use, because we run into, and I'm not going to name names, but we have some clients whose brand color is a color that does not meet minimum color contrast. And they want to use that brand color for text throughout their document because it matches their brand.
Yeah.
But man, what a challenge that becomes, because you're just fighting a losing battle. So if you pick your brand colors with accessibility in mind, it's going to serve you well.
Well, I think the colors we see most often are light blue, light green, and yellow. So those, or orange, the orange or yellow, right? And those logo colors, those brand colors, they stand out against certain other colors, but against white, boy, it really is hard to read, and definitely something to be thinking about. So let's talk about some of the tools that we use to check color contrast with. So the first one, I will say, if you're using Word or PowerPoint, Microsoft has the accessibility assistant in it that is going to tell you when you have text that fails minimum color contrast, but it will not tell you if you have objects like a bar chart or a line graph that don't meet minimum color contrast.
Yeah. That's a fairly new tool that they added, right? I think that was the last year they added that to their products, right?
The accessibility assistant has been gauging color contrast for text for quite a few years through the Microsoft accessibility checker, but it's gotten much better in recent years, in the last recent year, I would say. But yeah, and it even suggests new colors now. It says, hey, this is the color you had. Here's some other colors you might
like choose. Try this one. You'll be better off. And while we're talking about products that are or features that are built into products, Venngage is another one that has the color contrast checker built into the product. So I mean, for me, listen, I wish Illustrator and InDesign would add this into their product too. And Adobe, if you're listening, it'd be a great, nice feature to be able to click a button that says, make sure that the color I picked meets minimum color contrast. That'd be really cool.
Well, and they already have the engine for this, Chad, because if you go to color.adobe.com and click on the accessibility tab, you'll have all those tools are there. So they do exist in the Adobe ecosphere. They're just not embedded in the program. And I just wish that they would actually do that they would actually allow you to do that. Now, Illustrator and Photoshop do have colorblind mode inside each of them respectively. You can turn on print preview under proof setup. You can change it to deuteranopia or protanopia. I've noticed that compared to other colorblind checkers, I don't know what model they're using, but it's not, you're going to get different results. So don't split hairs. Like use the colorblind checkers and go, I need a good difference between one color and another, not, oh, I can sort of tell that this one's a little darker, because depending upon what how much color blindness you have, right? Because not everybody's color blindness is the same. It might be more or less impactful to you. So, don't skirt that line, man. Don't try to just be compliant. So,
totally agree.
One of the other color contrast checkers that we love is TPGI's Color Contrast Analyzer, right? That's a great one. And it's free, and it's Mac and PC. So it's really nice. Some IT departments don't like it because it isn't executable. And so for those people, we send them to
WebAIM.
Yes, WebAIM.
And WebAIM, I feel like it's improved over the years too, because I feel like back in the day you used to have to like plug in your values, but now WebAIM has a color picker.
Yes, a little eyedropper that you can just pull.
Yeah. Now it helps if you've got like two monitors, because you're literally picking an eyedropper in the web browser and then like moving over to your application and like picking up that color. So, doing it on a single monitor is a test of your patience. But
yes, especially on a laptop where you've got a small screen. So,
oh yeah. Really tough.
Yeah, no, and so if you go to webaim.org or you just look up WebAIM contrast checker, you're going to find it.
That's why I like the color contrast analyzer floats on top of your applications. And so it's really easy to integrate it together. Yeah.
I want to talk about something really important that is all this checking and eyedroppers and all this stuff is a lot of work. If you take the time, if your brand design team, if your brand management team takes the time to set up ahead of time an accessible color palette that hey, these 8 colors, these are our brand colors, and you can use them in these combinations. You can use white text on these 5 colors and black text on these 5, and you can look at the tints and, get together a color system. Then it really frees the designers to be able to use colors they know are going to be compliant without having to do all this guess and check, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, listen, you can set this up in pretty much any application. I don't care if it's Microsoft Word. You could go into the color picker. You can add every color to what is it called? An inkwell? I think they call it an inkwell at the bottom. You can add all your colors to the well and then just pick from them and always be using the right color. So that works in Word. It works in PowerPoint. In the Adobe applications, I'd encourage you to use a Creative Cloud library, right? You can set up all your colors, use them in all your Adobe applications. And that way it sets good guide rails for you and always make sure that you're using colors that are compliant.
Now, the one struggle that I have though is that for PowerPoint in themes, you only have a certain amount of colors that you can set up in the theme. And so when you do bar charts and line graphs and pie charts and things, sometimes the combinations that it puts together, you really can't control very well. I wish in the theme, we had the ability to say, when you have a data visualization that has 2 objects or 1 object, use this color. When there are 2 objects, use these 2. When it's 3 objects, use 3, and you could go down to maybe 6 or 8 colors, right? That would be really great because then I could brand style guideline my entire data visualization program so that no matter how many data values are in a bar chart or line graph or pie graph, it would just work. That would be amazing. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that'd be a great feature. Like I said, I could see using that in a number of places.
We talked about color contrast. There is so the 2 web content accessibility guidelines that guide us for color contrast is 1.4.3 contrast minimums. And it basically says that the visual presentation of text and images of text has a color contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. And we talked about that for regular text, right? And then it says there's some exceptions. Large text is 3 to 1. And then incidental things that are purely decoration don't really matter. The other color contrast web content accessibility guideline is 1.4.11, which is non-text contrast, which basically says that the visual presentation of the following have at least a 3 to 1 color contrast to adjacent colors. And adjacent is ones that are touching each other. So do yourself a favor and spread your pie chart out a little bit or your bar chart out a little bit so you don't have to follow this exactly. So then you're only bound to color contrast between the background, which is typically white, and your object. But you must have at least a 3 to 1 color contrast against adjacent objects and graphical objects. Now, graphical objects, Chad, are defined as parts of a graphic required to understand the content, right? And so somebody came to me one day and they said, Dax, I'm running out of accessible colors for my maps. I just don't have enough. So what do you mean? And like, well, my grass is this color, but then my roads are this color, and then my signs are this color and all. And I'm like, yeah, all that's ancillary. That's not what graphical objects mean, right?
Yeah, because you what you just said, right? It's the objects that have meaning, right?
Right.
And so people, and this is very common, Dax, right? I mean, a lot of times when we talk about color contrast, we talk about the requirements, and people are like, okay, everything in my graphic
Yes.
needs to have a 3-to-1 color contrast. You'll drive yourself crazy, right? I
Yes.
mean, so yeah, save yourself the frustration. I mean, it's not everything. It's only the things that are required to understand the meaning, you know?
And there is a get out of jail free card. At the end of that sentence, it says, except when a particular presentation of a graphic is essential to understanding the information conveyed. And if you're on the Web Content Accessibility Guideline and you click on essential, it says, if removed, would fundamentally change the information or functionality, and information and functionality cannot be achieved in another way. So what this is, think of a heat map or a population density map, right? Some of those, there's just not enough ways to have enough colors in between all the things. So then you have to pick your battles. What's the most important information out of that graphic? And I want to make sure that I have 3-to-1 color contrast there. And then everything else kind of falls, as secondary information.
Yeah, and yeah, I've seen those heat maps, right? And I've had plenty of conversations with students, with peers, and everything. And when you look at those heat maps, oftentimes there's like a big bubble,
Yep.
right, over every major city, right?
Right.
And then like from there, the bubbles get less intense, a little bit smaller, and
Sure.
they kind of fade away. So, I'm not at all saying it's easy, right? But that might be an approach you can take.
Sure.
Well, when you're trying to write alt text for it, you could say, map showing, the key cities of the following, right? And
Right.
and then, kind of describe that from there the bubbles kind of become less dispersed, right? And just describe it in that way.
Well, and I think we often forget that accessibility isn't just about alt text, right? This is not to say anything about what you just said. It's exactly correct, but that it's not accessibility is visual as well. And so if I'm a visual user and I'm not really getting the meaning or the takeaway of this graphic, good body text, visual, visible text that describes what's going on. See figure 12, see heat map figure 12 showing, and then actually talk about what it is that it's showing. And then you don't have to put a bunch of stuff in all your alt text. You don't have to worry about being overly descriptive, because you use that body copy to say population densities, Uber usage in around major metropolitan areas have risen by 32% or show a high density of blah, 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 except for in this one outlying area where the arena is, and it shows a higher density out there, right? You can make those complex associations because you talked about it in the body text. Then the alt text for the heat map just becomes heat map as explained in paragraph 3 or the paragraph on Uber or however you want to reference it. So just makes it so much easier.
It really does. It really does. Like I said, like we teach a class, Dax, called Writing Effective Alternate Text, right?
Yep.
And in that class, we kind of give you some, what do you call them, formulas, maybe like kind of like some formulas, some ways to approach that, because it is challenging, right? I would say alt text is easy until it's not, right? Like on paper, it's easy until you're sitting in front of your computer trying to write alt text for all these graphics,
We have that tip sheet that is the secrets that goes with the class, Secrets of Writing Effective Alt Text, where we give you some tips on how to do that. One of the other things to remember is that when you're writing alt text, right, you want to make sure that you're focusing on the most meaningful content first. Because if you get really verbose and you have to write a bunch of stuff, put the good stuff up front, because if you bury it 3/4 of the way down, the chances are the person's not going to hear it. They're going to get tired of hearing graphic, and they're just going to move on. So, making sure that that's there is really important.
And I think assistive technology users appreciate not being forced to listen to a novel, right?
Yeah.
Like they want to get to the point, right? They really want to just kind of get to the point, tell me what's important, and then, move on from there.
As we close out this session, because we are at the end, Chad, if you can believe it, I'd like to challenge everyone listening to the podcast to go back, look at your brand colors, and try to develop a little 6-color palette, if you don't already have one, that does meet minimum color contrast. We'd love to see you in our PDF Accessibility Facebook group and hear about your experience, right? Go through the exercise of figuring out the good color contrast, maybe do a couple samples and come up with something that works. We'd love to find out from you how easy it was. What were the challenges or roadblocks that you felt you ran into? Let us know. Our PDF Accessibility Facebook group has 5,400 members, almost 5,500 members now. It's really growing. And there's a lot of great people that could benefit by your exercise or even be inspired by your ability to go in. And rather than struggling every time you design a document, come up with a palette that works out for you.
Like, it's a great idea that you're kind of giving everybody homework, right? This is something we started doing in our classes that a lot of our clients are really enjoying, is that we will tack on a homework session to the class. So we'll do a 3-hour class and we'll say, okay, guys, this is your homework. And then next week or in 2 weeks, we're going to meet up again for 90 minutes and we're going to review, what you've done. And so I think what you just did is really, really nice for people to give them an activity to do, and actually put what they learned into practice.
Well, it's one thing to listen to it and do and hear and watch us do it. It's another thing to start doing it on your own with somebody standing watching you. And then it's a whole nother thing to do it when you're by yourself and no one's around. And so you'll have questions and we'd love to answer those questions for you.
Don't do it when somebody's watching you. We charge extra for that. Right? Do you ever see those signs in the stores? It's like, if you watch, it's double,
It's $20 an hour. Back then it's $8 an hour to watch or for me to do it. It's $12 an hour for you to stand behind me and watch me do it. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed learning about color contrast today and all the discussions that we had. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.